Have any amendments to the numbers?
Can we just get some information?
So these are huge community boards. Ours goes, for example, from 7 to 12, which is massive. I mean, they won't even all fit in the room. But can I just understand the costs of this? Do the community board rates of pay drop according to the number of community boards that there are?
No.
So the cost of this is how much more than the current system? Just in terms of community board members. I'm assuming they're paid, let me guess, about 35, is it? Well, so it's 30 and we go from...
And the ones on the peninsula are currently paid less. I'm assuming that would continue to be the case.
Well, because every second person's one.
Yes, you can. You can for community boards. You can't for council wards, but you can for community boards.
But at the
can
same
what?
time, Vicky, you need to offset that with one less community board, therefore one less lot of administration cost to council as well. And I think that's greater than the cost of the salaries.
Well, no, I'd just like to know the cost of this because I think there's too many community board members. I think these organisations have become very large, almost as large as the current council.
Are you proposing like an option two that there are 2 community board members from each?
Well, I think that would be plenty.
Yeah.
It's also
So-
not closer to the initial proposal, which is probably what you should be closer to.
Yeah, and people's submissions did focus on the numbers of community boards rather than the number of community board members. So are you moving that the council
well, I'm
numbers...
actually happy with option 1, but given that we've gone with option 2, I think the community board members should just go 2 in each line instead of 3.
Edward Akaroa and Wairere staying at 1-1 or going to 2-2.
Banks Peninsula with its 8,000 has got a community board member for, on this model, for every 1,000 people. Sorry.
I would prefer to deal with the peninsula separately than the city because it's a
I'm
different
happy
set
to
of
do that.
issues.
I'm happy to do that.
Maybe
Okay,
might require a
so-
separate debate for the peninsula.
Okay, so well, let's do the peninsula separately, and let's take an amendment from Councillor Buck that we reduce the number of community board members per ward, so that's every subdivision of the community board area from 3 to 2.
Yeah.
Do I have a seconder for that position?
May I ask one question, Chair? May I ask a question?
I'd like a seconder first. Right, Tim. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. May I ask the staff, is based on the current the Local Government Commission Act, whether the number of, for instance, like a community board, whether the community board member has to be more than the double, and then the appoint councillor in the board, or just equal to? I just want to know.
No, so the number of appointed members has to be less than half the total numbers. So if you had 2 elected and 3 appointed, that would be a total of 9. So your 3 members would be less than half of that. So that would be acceptable. So your appointed members have to be less than half the total numbers of the community board.
So you mean that, for instance, like if we reduce the 3 to 2 for each ward, then its community board is a 6th community board member plus the 3 councillors. They still comply with the principle.
Yes, yep.
Okay, yeah. I just want to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Yep.
Can I quickly speak to why I'm going to abstain with it? Because I don't agree with the principle. I do agree, in all honesty, that these numbers there's far too much representation, in Banks Peninsula. I'm exaggerating, but
No, we're dealing with Banks Peninsula separately.
Oh, so you're going on to the city
We're
ones?
only reducing
okay.
the 3 to the 2.
Oh, just for the urban wards.
Just for the
policy
urban
ones.
wards.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Well,
So I will put that
my
motion.
answer's no on this.
All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. Okay, we'll have a can you put up a voting thing?
So if you're voting no, there's 3 members
members for each suburb.
And if you're voting yes, just...
Two.
So where's the amendment? That the community board members be reduced from 3 to 2 for each subdivision excluding Banks Peninsula?
So you're going from 12 to 9.
Okay. So I disagree with the whole thing, so I'll abstain from it.
Well, then, that means
Well,
that,
then we're gonna
that
get
means
three,
that
Jane.
you'll get
So
three.
we're just voting on the amendment now, aren't we, at the moment?
But I'm not voting against it because I don't actually
Yes,
think
I
two's
know,
any
but
better.
the thing is that, I mean,
I think it's all...
well, you can vote for the lesser of two evils, or you can
I know.
not vote.
I know, and that's what grinds me with it, because lesser of two evils means that, you know, which flavour fish milkshake do you prefer?
Yeah, well, I will vote in this one because I've got a, this is not about the groupings, this is about the cost and the numbers.
I know,
So-
I just think it's lost its way completely, though.
Well, did we get an answer on the additional cost that people are voting for or against?
It's 25,000 a year for community board members.
Yes, but it's the administration, it's making the rooms bigger, it's getting new accommodation for, because there are some community board rooms that will not take 12 people, plus the administrative support, so.
So can I just know how many current community board members there are in total? 40, thank you.
How many current
And this
community board
goes
members
to-
are there, and how much extra is it going to cost
This
us
goes
to
to how
increase
many?
it to 3?
Can I just get clear? Like, we're in the middle of voting, and now we're having questions and debate and
Yeah.
all sorts of arguments.
Yep.
No, we're not having arguments, we're just clarifying what the situation is. But, you know, I mean, I am going to vote on this because it's not to do with the groupings of the wards. And we are allowed to take the cost, into account.
The vote's just been held, and we're now having a question and answer session. It's weird. It has.
Yeah, it has, but I couldn't call the vote because it sounded like it was pretty
I haven't voted yet.
close.
No.
No, I haven't got a thing yet.
So can you add up the total under the amendment? Under the amendment, can you give me the total now?
Did you get a,
No, just wait till.
I haven't
What this adds up
voted.
to under this amendment? Can you just? I'll just, so I just say 2, 6, 2.
No?
I don't think that totals 53 though. I'll just do it on my Excel.
Eh? This is about whether we reduce the number of community board members per subdivision, per ward, to 2, so that instead of having 3 per ward, we have 2 per ward.
Instead of having 12 at large, you have 9 at large.
Yeah, that's right. But this is whether it's 2 per ward or 3 per ward. And somebody was asking about the cost of it, but we don't have the costs in front of us.
So this will be,
What I said the other day, you've got a disadvantage now because you've got 3 paired wards and 2 paired wards, which
Yeah,
means
we're not.
a
We've
community board is...
we've already discussed this.
so this model has approximately the same number of community boards as we've currently got.
It was too close to call though, so we're going to have a vote on it. And if we end up with an even vote, if we end up with a draw, then it stays at 3.
So the voting system.
Because that's the voting system. But it's not 3 now. No, but it is in the proposal.
No,
No,
no.
it's a
Oh, I
proposal.
see.
Yeah.
So probably you default to the proposal.
We default to the proposal.
Yeah, this is an amendment to
Well,
it.
this is
So
just an amendment to what's been put up as a substantive motion, though. If the amendment is lost, then the substantive goes back to the substantive.
No,
which
it goes
is
to
agreed.
the proposal. I'm sorry, it's an amendment to the proposal. And the proposal...
I put up my motion, which was option 2A.
I know, but we split it into 2 votes. It defaults to the proposal, Andrew. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
okay.
It does. Which means that it is 2.
Decisions you were making. One decision was actually about
It
the
goes to 2
boundaries
anyway.
of the wards.
Oh,
The
because-
next
yeah,
decision was
I guess
about the
because
number.
benefit, yeah, no,
And if you,
I'd quite like to hear the explanation from Mary, please, because I'll talk.
so there's 2 different decisions. The Mayor's right. There's 2 different decisions you have to make here. One is the boundaries of the community boards of which you've moved. The next decision is the number of community board members. Now, if you can't reach a decision on the number of community board members, you probably would have to default to what went out as the initial proposal, which had two members in each subdivision.
And actually, just on
Rather
that,
than 3.
there was no submissions favouring this anyway.
No.
So
But-
I don't know that this is even marginally legal.
I actually think that perhaps technically we've gone round the wrong way. Because the default position is 2, that's the default position, because that's what we went out with in the proposal. I think that we actually have to have a motion that moves 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to have a separate motion that moves 3. So,
And given that there was no evidence produced for this, on what basis can somebody move that?
so what I'm going to do is kind of rule myself out of order now and say that we're going to delete all of that. We're going to delete the Councillor Buck-Scandrett amendment, and what we're going to do is we are going to have Andrew and go back up. Andrew and go back. Andrew and Clearwater. So Turner and Clearwater moved and seconded that there be 3 community boards in the urban wards. 3 community board members in the urban subdivisions of the wards, right?
So just as a point of order,
Which is as much as it doesn't what I put up, we did.
Yeah.
No, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we're going to move. We're going to have. So this is a separate motion that Councillor Turner, because the first one was that we moved the
Boundaries.
the community board subdivisions. Now we're moving that the community board members be 3 per subdivision. And that creates something that's now different from what we went out with. What we went out with was 2 per subdivision, all right? Okay.
and can I just, as a point of order, understand on what basis and what evidence is this projected on?
That's not a point of order. That's a
So we've heard submissions, but nobody has suggested this.
yeah,
And
but
it's just come from left field now.
no, it was. We did have an option that had 3 per ward.
Well, I don't remember any submissions favouring this. Yeah,
So-
we desperately want more community board members.
The thing is that, I mean, I don't know, do you want to open this up for debate now that we've got the proper resolution on the table? All right, we'll open it up for debate. Phil?
Look, it's not from left field, it's in the option, as part of option 2. I think I'm going to support 3 members. I think that although it wasn't, submitters didn't specify they wanted an actual increase in the number of representatives, I think they certainly made it clear they wanted an increase in us as councillors to support an increase in their representation. And that's what 3 members would do. And it would also allow board members to be proactive and actually be effective in representing their areas of interest. There's plenty of scope for community boards in terms of future delegations that I expect this council will give them. There's plenty of scope for community boards to rebuild the city and do the things which we would like them to do. So that's why I'm certainly supporting the option of, or the number of board members per subdivision, or to be 3.
Tim?
Thank you. I won't be supporting this because when the first when this first went out, I do believe that we heard that people wanted better representation, and I believe the 16 council model does this. With the 2-member community boards, in the original proposal went out, it was done as economically as possible. I think that's really important to remember. This 3 proposal changes that totally. So I do believe with the 16 council model, we have listened to what the people have said and they want better representation from the councillors, which they will do. But with the 2-member council community board members, I think we still achieve that, and we do that as economically as possible and as responsibly as possible. Thank you.
Mary's just highlighting an issue here, which I think we do need to take into account. One is that the issue is hard to substantiate based on the evidence that we've received, and it is based on submissions that we've received. If we're changing from what we went out with to what we're going with, then there really does have to be something of substance to go with it, and there isn't in this particular occasion. So we are at risk going down this track. But the second thing, and I think it's probably more important, is the definition of promoting good local government under the Local Government Act. The Commission has to be satisfied when it's doing a reorganisation that it will best promote the purpose of local government and will facilitate in the affected area improved economic performance, which may include efficiencies and cost savings and productivity improvements both within local authorities and for the businesses and households that interact with those local authorities. So even though that's a reorganisation around local authorities merging and things like that, actually we do need to take the finances into account, and that's why I'm abstaining from the position on the boundaries, because that's based on communities of interest, which I think councillors are able to reflect on far more accurately than I can. But in terms of the money, I'm afraid I have to support the alternative to the 3. Paul and then Andrew.
I heard loud and clearly from a number of submitters that came through and said they had been very well represented this term. They were very happy with the way they'd been represented. So to add more community board members, I think, would be a mistake, because we've actually heard they've been quite happy. So, and the same goes for the councillors, but obviously that's not the debate here. It is about the community board members. So I will be voting against adding any more community board members in this process.
Andrew?
Yeah, as the proposer of the motion and having heard what we've just heard, with the agreement of the seconder and to avoid a vote on an amendment, I'm quite happy for the proposal that I moved and Councillor Clearwater seconded to be amended to 2 board members per subdivision rather than 3. And that actually avoids the issue. And to be honest, had we known the information that we now know, we may well have not put that proposal in the beginning. So I'm quite happy, as the mover, to simply change the community board subdivision representation from 3 to 2 to avoid any further vote.
Well,
so I think you're effectively withdrawing.
yeah, but Banks Peninsula's we're dealing with separately. Yeah, but we're all on the same page.
We're on page 2.
So the initial.
So just withdraw the amendment. If you withdraw the amendment, then it's 2 as the default position.
Yeah. However we write that
is that right?
It would be good to pass a resolution that we confirm the initial
Okay,
proposal.
so we confirm the original proposal that that there be 2.
Elected from each subdivision.
Yeah. We confirm the original proposal that there be 2. The initial proposal that there be 2 community board members elected to each subdivision, elected from each subdivision. And that's moved Councillor Turno, seconded Councillor Clearwater. So if you take out the wording above that. Cool. All right, I'll put that. Yanni?
So my understanding was there were a number of submitters that said they didn't wish to reduce the number of community boards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see any that said that they wanted to decrease the number. So we've decreased the number. So does that mean that we're also got the same issues?
So we haven't, most of the submissions were they didn't want the number of metro community boards decreased.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what the submission was about, and we haven't, in this proposal, we still have the 6 metro community boards. So it's
It's
consistent with
exactly
the
what the
submissions.
submitters asked for.
Right.
It's about, the only reason that it's showing a reduction is because of Banks Peninsula was 2 community board areas, now 1.
So the submissions and for all those other people that read and analysed them all, our report clearly says it was the metro boards people were concerned about.
Okay.
Yep.
That's fine. Thanks.
Dave?
And just to clarify, the total number of community board members at the moment versus this amendment?
2, 4, 6.
Have we got a total number of community board members? Somebody must have the
11, 12, 13,
40?
15. So we've
Banks Peninsula.
Peninsula. Yeah, so
But
excluding
this current
Banks
amendment
Peninsula.
is,
Yeah, so it's the same.
Yeah.
Thanks.
David?
I'd just like to point out that if we're supporting this motion of 2 community board members per subdivision, we are actually reducing the representation in our community boards. That currently it's 5 members elected at large from a community board area. We are now in the wards that are proposed to be paired, we'll have 4 elected members, community board members, and 2 councillors, so your representation is actually dropped by 1 for those community boards, and I don't think that's sort of quite what people envisage, so I'll be voting against the resolution.
Okay. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. No. So hands up for no. Gough and East. Now we move to Banks Peninsula. Does, now, I presume, Andrew, you want to move the current proposal, the initial proposal?
The 8 members over 4 subdivisions, yes.
Okay, so
That's right,
Andrew's
Councillor.
moved the initial proposal be adopted for Banks Peninsula.
Well, that's different than the initial proposal, because the initial proposal
No,
had
the initial proposal was 2 each.
No. Oh, hang on, so the
initial proposal,
So
go
the
back to option 1, the initial proposal. You are moving the initial proposal.
right, yep.
Okay, do I have a seconder for the initial proposal? Phil?
So there's now 1 councillor and 8 community board members. So a community board of 9, exactly the same as what 70,000 people get over the hill. Is that what's suggested?
Oh,
Well, we'll debate this in a minute.
sorry, that's
but yes.
actually incorrect, sorry. I apologise, because the initial proposal had 2 community boards.
Correct, yes. Yeah.
And it's now proposed that there be 1. So you're going to move that the initial proposal be amended to establish 1 community board with 4 subdivisions.
So we've already made the decision to establish the 1 Banks Peninsula Community Board.
Yes, but we
haven't
have to
previously?
confirm it as a council.
Okay.
So shall we do that separately and then
debate the numbers.
and then debate the numbers?
The numbers, the answer to the numbers question probably speaks to the correct number of subdivisions as well, because it may be that if we ended up with different numbers than the 2 + 2 + 2 + 2, then 2 subdivisions may be more appropriate than 4. So the subdivisions and the numbers really are connected.
Well, if that's the case, then maybe we should foreshadow another resolution, which is that Akaroa Wairewa be one subdivision and Littleton Mount Herbert be another subdivision.
We could split, we could do the first one, that one community board established,
Yeah.
then decide the
So if we did the one community board, and then if we did a
Okay.
second resolution with the subdivisions and the number of members.
That the initial proposal be amended to establish one community board, all right? So take out the subdivisions. Oh, with subdivisions. No, that's fine.
Yep.
With subdivisions. So I'll, and that's seconded by councillor Clearwater. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Okay, so hands up for no. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, hands up for aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's no. I've already said that I'm not voting on. I'm not voting on boundaries. Community board boundaries. So that's 7-6. So that's the initial proposal be amended to establish one community board with subdivisions. The second question is the establishment of the subdivisions and then the number of representatives per subdivision. So really the 2 choices are to establish a subdivision of Akaroa Wairewa and another subdivision of Littleton Mount Herbert, or to establish 4 separate subdivisions.
So I'd like to move 4 separate subdivisions with 2 members from each.
Could we do that separately, the numbers?
Yeah.
So could we do the 4 subdivisions separate to the numbers?
The numbers and the subdivisions are inextricably connected, because if we ended up with something different than 8 members, we probably would want the subdivisions to look different as well. When I get into the debate, I'll explain why there's a need for equality, because it'll come to all sorts of outcomes that are things that we wouldn't want if we don't do it that way, and that's the reason why, in my view, the subdivisions and the numbers are inextricably connected.
So,
So the 4 subdivisions?
Akaroa Wairewa, Mount Herbert and Littleton.
So one subdivision that elects community board member
Yep.
or members.
Look, we're going to come to that in a minute, but so you want to move that there be 4 separate the 4 subdivisions, Akaroa Wairewa, Mount Herbert, Littleton. I mean, they're all written down there, with 2 community board members elected from each subdivision. And you're seconding that, Phil? Okay. So, well, hang on, but is there does anyone want to amend it?
I would vote against it.
Yeah, but do you want to amend it, though?
No.
But then what happens?
Well,
I cannot, for the life of me, understand how.
But if you, no, sorry, let me just put this bluntly. If it's not amended, then it will default to the original proposal, which is 2 from each. That's the original proposal. So actually, oh, well, hang on. No, I haven't got the original proposal. The original proposal is that there be 2 separate community boards,
Which we don't want.
which we've already agreed not to have. So what do we do?
Could the amendment be that there would be...
Eh?
They'll just have to make a decision.
Okay, so all right, so we'll have a debate about these 4 separate subdivisions. If it's carried,
I guess we would have to default to 2.
No, that's not the original.
Yeah, this is the original.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so
Do you want an amendment on it?
Or is it foreshadowing?
eh?
Do you want an amendment?
Yes, because
Okay.
if there's an amendment that's in order, if the amendment is in order, then it will assist us to actually debate whether this is going to be.
Well, here's a suggestion, which can be an amendment. So if they're going to have 4 wards, which I understand they want.
Yeah, four subdivisions.
Okay, so then I would suggest having 1 community board member from Akaroa, 1 from Waiwera, and 1 from Mount Herbert, and 2 from Littleton.
Right. So that is perfectly in order as an amendment. So 1 from Akaroa, 1 from Wairewa, 1 from Mount Herbert, and 2 from Littleton.
Can I just point out that the population in Mount Herbert is about the same as the population in Littleton. So if you look at the breakdown, you've got Akaroa at 1,800, Wairewa at I'll put 1,854 in Akaroa, 1,098 in Wairewa, Mount Herbert 2,610, and Littleton 2,660. Yeah.
So go 1, 1, 2, 2.
Okay, so 1, 1, 2, 2. That there be 1 from Akaroa and Wairewa, and 2 from Mount Herbert, 2 from Littleton. And do we have a seconder for that amendment? And Tim seconds that amendment. All right, now discussion. Andrew.
Can I ask a question first of all?
Yep.
And it relates to the pay that the Littleton, Mount Herbert and Akaroa Wairewa community boards currently are paid, which is less than the community board members in the city, and the chairs are also paid significantly less than those in the city. Would that continue to be the case under a new model that saw over-representation on the peninsula?
So the determination by the local authority was that the chairperson in those community boards get 26 and the members get 17, where the chairs of the other boards get 38.5 and the members get 25.7. They may amend that with amendments to the community boards, but I don't know.
Salary for the Peninsula board members, I didn't quite.
So chairperson 26,200, members 17,500, in the urban areas 38,500, and members 25,700. But they will almost certainly review this.
What's the Akaroa one? Because remember there are 2 chairs being paid in the 2 community board areas at the moment.
Because it's the same. It's the same.
Yeah, 26 too. Yep.
So that was their determination for post-election based on the current arrangements. So I think.
All right, Andrew.
So I'm assuming that we're going to debate the whole thing together and then just take the 2 votes. So the peninsula is out of kilter with the rest of the city in terms of representation, and that's because the peninsula is actually very different than the rest of the city, and that's something that we've canvassed well in all the earlier parts of the debate as well. Now, the reason I'm putting forward 4 subdivisions is because there are 4 quite distinct geographical areas on the peninsula. If we talk about distances, that certainly relates to the need for subdivisions, because when it takes an hour and a half to drive from Littleton to Port Levy, 45 minutes from the hilltop to O'Kane's Bay, that talks to the driving distances and the separation of these communities. So the Littleton subdivision, the Mount Herbert subdivision, the Wairewa subdivision and the Akaroa subdivision actually reflects the previous administrative arrangements in terms of the borough councils and district councils prior to the amalgamation into the Banks Peninsula District and prior to the amalgamation into the city. So that they are logical boundaries. The representation in terms of 2 members per subdivision, that would give a community board of 8 plus 1 councillor, which is a workable size. There's a need for equality across the subdivisions administratively, in my view, regardless of the representation around numbers. And for Akaroa and Wairewa to be overrepresented is actually aligned with the earlier decision that we made with the proposal that we went out for consultation on, which is that because of the isolation that Akaroa in particular and Wairewa to an extent are subject to, there is a need for greater representation in those areas. There's also, in my view, a need for equality across the 4 subdivisions, because as soon as you get an inequality, then that speaks to the chair always coming from one part of the peninsula, potentially, and also speaks to the meetings always being held in one part of the peninsula, potentially, which in turn leads to ineffective representation for Akaroa and Wairewa, which was exactly the reason why we identified those communities as needing a higher level of representation in that earlier decision. The other part of effective representation is actually getting good people to stand for these positions. When you look at the Akaroa subdivision being bigger than 1/3 of the geographical size of the rest of the city, so the metropolitan area, it's a certain type of person that would put their hand up to do that, and there may in fact not be a person that was willing to do that on their own, because it's a huge area. There's a huge amount of driving. There's huge diversity in those communities. And if we look at the amount of work in terms of each of those bays having its own separate residents association, each of those reserves having its own separate reserve management committee, the level of representation that the people on that part of the peninsula, in fact across the whole peninsula, have been used to go from what currently is 5 members representing Akaroa Wairewa to 2 members representing that whole area would be a significant change in representation for the people of that part of the ward. Also, to expect one person to do the work that 3 community board members are currently doing in the Akaroa subdivision is a big ask for that person, and I believe that would have an effect on the quality and number of people that were willing to stand to do that. So the reason that the level of representation on the peninsula needs to be different, in my view, is that because the peninsula is very different. It's all of the same arguments that we heard around the need for the councillor arrangement to be different. It's about distance, it's about diversity in community, it's about the amount of work. And it's also very easy when you look at the landscape of the peninsula and the amount of roading on the peninsula to take a view that the work of a Peninsula Community Board member isn't just necessarily driven by the people, by the population, it's also driven by the environment when we're talking about roading, when we're talking about parking, when we're talking about landscape issues, and when we're talking about reserves, of which there are many and of which are a far bigger size than many of the reserves in the city. So my strong view, as the person around the table with the greatest familiarity with the way that the community boards currently work successfully, and with the way that the peninsula communities currently work, is that we do have a need for those 8 members to ensure effective representation for the peninsula, and I strongly advocate that, and I urge my fellow councillors around the table to vote in favour of the 2+2+2+2 model for reasons of effective representation and equality between different parts of the ward from an administrative viewpoint.
Very good. Ref and then Yanni.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I completely appreciate what Andrew is saying about Banks Peninsula. It is a special place and in a way needs, I think, some kind of special representation. But the problem is that in explaining the current position with the community boards they have at the moment is effectively illuminating the problem that we have here by trying to fix something that just is not broken. And we're going round and round the houses trying to fit all of this stuff into something that makes sense, when actually we don't even need to be doing it in the first place. So I don't think there is an answer here. I don't think we're going to come up with a good answer. If we wanted an extra councillor, we could have probably put one in somewhere quite easily without having to change any of these community boards. And I just think we're making a rod for our own back here, and you know, this discussion is a prime example of why actually we should just leave things as they are. Wait another 3 years, see how the population shifts, and then have another look at it. So in a way, I'm not particularly arguing for the amendment that I put forward, other than from a people representation perspective, it's more balanced, because it's very difficult to argue from a representation perspective that having 9 community board members in Banks Peninsula is equivalent to 9 in Fendleton Waimari, soon to be known as Fendleton Waimari Harewood, which is actually the same ward. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, actually, I couldn't care how many community board members they have in Banks Peninsula, but, you know, it's not an easy decision for us to make.
Yanni?
Thank you. I think it's really important that we have to do this by law. So actually, to say things like we don't need to be doing this in the first place isn't actually, it's not a choice that we have. So we have to go through a representation review, and part of the key element of that is listening to what people have said to us and trying to come up with a proposal that responds, and then agreeing to some recommendations to go forward to the Local Government Commission. I heard very clearly from the Peninsula that they were fundamentally opposed to the corporatisation of local government in our city. And I have a lot of sympathy with that view. The idea that you can just go to fewer and fewer elected members and possibly have more commissioners, unelected, more consultants, more things being delegated away, and less representation is something that actually I think is a choice that we could make, but it's not a choice that I would agree to. And I think we fundamentally have to look at what the purpose of community boards are. And they are to advocate for their communities and represent their communities, and they've got local decision making. So I have a strong view that it's not just as simple as comparing the Peninsula to the city when you look at the community boards. And therefore I support the amendment that's been put forward. We heard a number of people talk about not wanting to have people voting in a certain area for their representatives. They didn't want to lose the local opportunity to select who represented them because they had smaller communities of interest, and that came through very clear from the Peninsula. So for the reasons that people didn't want Sumner being part of the Banks Peninsula Ward, it's the same reason I think why you would have subdivisions at a community board level. And actually what we've done is reduce the cost of administration, which probably actually saves money. So I think the trade-off is by reducing the number of community boards, and we're also proposed to reduce the number of community board members. It's just to the extent, the debate we're having is the extent to which we do that. I think what's being proposed is a fair compromise, recognising the submissions that didn't want change, but accepted that if there was change, that they would have one community board for the Peninsula. And I think this is the fairest level of representation with those subdivisions and the numbers that have been proposed.
Very good. All right.